Angela was known in her small city as a woman who wanted nothing less than the best. She grew up in a middle-class family, her father a teacher and her mother a nurse, but Angela always believed she was meant for a higher life. Her friends described her as ambitious, her critics called her greedy. Whatever the truth was, Angela made a vow to herself: she would never settle for an ordinary man. That was why, when she met Richard Lawson, she thought her dreams had finally come true. Richard was a businessman in his mid-30s, already successful in real estate. He wasn't flashy with his wealth, but his expensive suits, quiet confidence, and well-kept car spoke volumes. For Angela, who was in her mid-20s at the time, it was love at first sight, or perhaps, more accurately, ambition at first sight. Richard was charmed by Angela's beauty. She was stunning, with glowing skin, sharp eyes, and a figure that turned heads wherever she went. She carried herself like someone who belonged in luxury. And Richard, a man who had worked hard for everything he owned, found her sophistication attractive. Within a year of dating, he asked her to marry him. Their wedding was grand. Angela insisted on nothing less: a luxurious hall, designer gown, imported decorations. Richard paid for everything without complaint. To him, it was an investment in a lifetime of happiness. But for Angela, it was a sign that she had made it. She had married into wealth, and her life of comfort had officially begun. At first, their marriage seemed perfect. Angela enjoyed the luxury of traveling, shopping, and hosting parties. Richard loved spoiling his wife, even if he sometimes felt she cared more about the lifestyle than the relationship itself. Still, he tolerated it. He reasoned that her love for finer things was simply part of her charm. But over time, the cracks began to show. Angela rarely showed genuine interest in Richard's struggles. Business was not always smooth. There were times when deals fell through, tenants defaulted, or investments didn't pay off. During those periods, Richard needed emotional support, but Angela's focus remained on her shopping trips and social appearances. She often scolded him when he hinted at cutting down on expenses, insisting that her image among her peers could not be compromised. "You're a Lawson," she would say sharply. "People expect us to live a certain way. If you start acting broke, they'll laugh at me." Richard would sigh and let it go, but the seed of discontent grew. He began to realize that Angela's love was tied to his wallet, not his heart. The final turning point came when Angela discovered that Richard had set up a trust for his properties and business shares. The trust was designed to secure his wealth for future generations, especially his siblings, children, since he and Angela had no children yet. Angela was furious. "You mean all this time I've been married to you, and I don't even have control over your assets?" she snapped one evening after snooping through his documents. Richard explained calmly, "Angela, the trust is just a security measure. In case something happens to me, my family won't have to fight in court. It doesn't mean you'll suffer. You'll always be taken care of." But Angela didn't want to be taken care of. She wanted ownership, power, and entitlement. In her mind, she had invested her youth and beauty into the marriage, and she deserved to control the fortune. That night, something changed in her heart. She no longer saw Richard as a partner. She saw him as an obstacle to her financial independence. Angela started plotting her way out. She began confiding in friends about how unhappy she was, painting Richard as a cold, controlling husband. She flirted with the idea of freedom, convinced herself she had wasted years of her life, and finally, one morning, she broke the news. "I want a divorce," she declared. Richard, though hurt, wasn't entirely surprised. He had sensed her detachment long before. Still, the words cut deep. He had loved her genuinely, despite her flaws. But he also knew something Angela didn't. She would not get a single share of his wealth. When the divorce proceedings began, Angela's lawyers came armed with demands: half of Richard's properties, half of his investments, and ongoing alimony. Angela was confident. In her circle of friends, divorce was often a jackpot for women. She believed she was about to walk away wealthier than she had ever dreamed. But Richard's legal team was meticulous. Every property, every business share, every major asset was protected under the trust he had created years before their marriage. The trust was airtight, legally binding, and beyond the reach of divorce settlements. The only assets in Richard's direct name were his personal belongings, his bank account, and a modest car. Angela was stunned. She accused Richard of manipulation, but the court ruled in his favor. She had no legal claim to the trust, and since she had signed a prenup, something she had forgotten in her excitement of the wedding, her chances of securing alimony. The divorce was finalized within months. Angela left Richard's mansion with only her clothes, some jewelry, and a small settlement that barely covered her designer lifestyle for a few weeks. She had no savings of her own, no investments, and no career to fall back on. She had built her entire life around being Richard Lawson's wife, and now, stripped of that title, she was just Angela again. Her friends, who once envied her, drifted away. They were more interested in her wealth than her company, and without the status, she became irrelevant to them. The high-end boutiques she used to frequent no longer welcomed her with the same warmth, and the social events that once rolled out red carpets now overlooked her entirely. Meanwhile, Richard moved on. He focused on his business, expanded his real estate empire, and even found love again with a woman who valued him for his character, not his wallet. He remained polite whenever he crossed paths with Angela, but in his heart, he felt a quiet relief. The woman who had nearly drained him of peace was no longer part of his life. Years later, Angela sat in a small apartment she could barely afford, staring at old photos of her and Richard. The glamorous parties, the trips abroad, the expensive gifts, it all seemed like a distant dream. She thought about the life she could have still had if she had chosen love over greed, partnership over entitlement. But pride is a dangerous thing. At the time, she had been too blinded by her hunger for wealth to see the value of the man beside her. She believed she could outsmart him, walk away rich, and start anew. Instead, she walked away with nothing. The gossip around town never stopped. People whispered about how Angela Lawson thought she could outplay her husband and ended up broke. Some pitied her, but most saw it as justice. Angela knew, deep down, that she had lost not just wealth, but a chance at a fulfilling marriage. She had gambled her future on greed and lost everything. The story of Angela and Richard became a cautionary tale. People used it as an example of why marriages built on superficial desires rarely survive. Angela had sought wealth, but she never secured it. Richard had sought love, but he had been deceived. In the end, the law protected him and life punished her.